come up with your own ideas, right? I wish that I had the mentorship to have encouraged me, like, you have good ideas, just try them out. You just don't know if you don't try. But it's great to stay up with what's happening, and then it's also great to explore and be creative for what could happen.
Welcome to Cyber Chats, a podcast made by the National Cryptologic Foundation. I'm your host, Kennedy Taylor, and together we'll be demystifying the world of cybersecurity by talking with amazing cyber enthusiasts like you, as well as industry professionals. Be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to Cyber Chats. Today we have a very special guest. She is very familiar and close to our NCF family. We have Dr. Yolanda Reid. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad that you put on this podcast. I think the purpose is incredible, so I'm glad to be here and glad to help.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. And I was, Googling your resume when I was, so kindly handed your contact information, and I saw that you've done a lot. From working to also working in the, consulting sector as well. Would you like to introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah. So I have been working in the cyber industry for over 25 years. And I started off working at NSA. I thought I was going to work at NSA and do microelectronics. Actually, that's what I went to school to do. I thought I was going to make chips. And then I got there and they said that, for the first time in our life, we're outsourcing. You got to pick another thing to do. And I picked cyber, but we didn't have the term cyber then. It was just doing work in a dark room and it seemed fun. And I didn't get necessarily like what was happening, but it was really, really fun. And then, as life happened and you start seeing like how your contributions, related to national security, then I got it. And then I got to see how cyber was able to help so many people. And so I did that for a career, and then I left and went in industry and still stayed close, still did cyber at Raytheon in the research and development group. And then also I went to IBM and I started off there with cyber and how cyber blends into AI and quantum. So it's been quite a journey with the little bumps along the way, but it has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, very incredible resume. Absolutely. Something that we all, listening as well as me, we aspire to have a resume as, incredible as yours. So incredible. One of the topics that I know are very passionate about speaking about is emerging tech, and perhaps that's from your background. You mentioned working a little bit in AI. So why is that topic so interesting for you?
Yeah, I love innovation and I love the future. And so when I first started and I said I did cyber, we didn't have the term cyber. So we were really doing really unique things before people knew about it. And so when you have that perspective that you're working in the future, some things seem very impossible. And that's what I look at emerging technology. Emerging tech is taking the future and making it very possible. And so there's so many challenges that you run into today. And then with emerging tech, you can start addressing and saying, like, can we overcome something that was impossible before? And so I did cyber as emerging tech. I was thrown into, I had a job doing satellites once, and how can we make modifications to a commercial satellite to do different things that has never been done before? And then when I was at a research and development place, we were looking at quantum and we were looking at biotech. And so that using technology to be able to empower the future is incredible. And I want people to have that, just have that understanding that that exists, right? You don't have to have everything figured out today. because tomorrow's going to be very different, and just be very open to the thought that you can shape the future. And what is impossible today doesn't always have to stay impossible.
I love that. And thinking about your background in both national security and cyber defense, if you will,
Mhm.
adversaries are constantly evolving, as we know. From your experience, what does staying relevant or staying ahead actually mean in today's world?
Yes, I tell people that you always have to learn. So get very comfortable with learning. And so going to school is great. I think you should go to school. Getting your certifications, I think, is great. You should definitely do that. That's going to open more doors for you. But then also, you need to read. And I like to read about things that are happening, things that have happened that I can't believe happened. And when I say read, I don't mean like reading like a thick a technology book for, 300 pages, articles, just quick articles and articles of people doing good things. And then also articles that people are promoting the bad things. Because if you don't know good and you don't know bad, how can you protect against it? And so that is how I think you can stay relevant and stay encouraged and then come up with your own ideas, right? So some ideas when I first started my career, I was like, I really think we should have this, and I really think we should do this. And people are like, oh, I don't know. And I doubt it myself. To find it happen 15 years later, I'm so mad. I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought of that. I even wrote a paper about it. And then it happened. So I wish that I had the mentorship to have encouraged me like, you have good ideas, just try them out. You just don't know if you don't try. But it's great to stay up with what's happening, and then it's also great to explore and be creative for what could happen.
One thing you mentioned is how, back then cyber was very different or didn't even have that name. And thinking about emerging technology, do you think the biggest risk is falling behind technologically, or is it maybe just misunderstanding how our adversaries are using the same emerging tech and tools?
I think that's a great question. So I'm working on quantum awareness programs right now, and I love it. And so when I am working on quantum awareness, I'm trying to say quantum is coming, and this is going to be the effect on cyber. And I have two perspectives. My two perspectives that I make sure I let people know is the first perspective is when quantum machines come, it's going to break our traditional security, right? The way that we secure our devices and everything, our bank accounts and all of those things, quantum has the potential to break it. But then also, the second part is quantum's going to give us a great opportunity to do things that we've never done before. And I think it's both important. I think it's important to see how an adversary would use a new tech, but then also you should be using it too. Like, what problems can you solve? And so, I'm telling people, I'm like, think of what's impossible. And it's impossible because we limit ourselves, actually. With computers and technology before, we kind of limit ourselves to two choices, A or B, ones or two, that kind of thing. With quantum, we get to look at infinite possibilities at the same time, and we get to choose what is best. It's going to be a whole new world of making decisions, which means we'll be able to answer a lot of impossible questions today.
Very cool. Quantum awareness. So I assume that's in your, professional job. I'm wondering too, with, quantum becoming, I'll say slowly more mainstream. It's obviously not right now, but to the youth that are listening, you never know, in 5 years it could be very mainstream. Is there a way that they could start preparing earlier, making sure that they're, educated on quantum computing or even like post-quantum
Mhm.
cryptography in order to, handle,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, what is going to be very important? And this is, quantum's the next thing, but there's going to be something after the next thing. And when I was at working research, they were already working. I know,
Can't
isn't
handle
that
that.
crazy? They were already working on, well, after quantum, we're going to be doing this. And so quantum is just the next thing, even though we're still trying to figure out AI, right? Um, and so what you're going to need to do is get used to learning, like I said, right? Get used to being comfortable with learning. And then math and science. Those are the foundations to all of it, right? And so with quantum, I know that when I was in school, I took linear algebra, and I could tell you I don't really remember that much about it, except I got an A in it. But that's a foundation for programming in quantum. And so math and science, those are going to be the things that you're going to need in the future. And if you can program, I recommend that too. And I don't mean like heavy program. I would start with the basics of looking at Python, and just being comfortable. If if you can handle it, I think it's just going to be very, very helpful for you, because what is not going to go away is humans are going to be interacting with computers. And so, how we interact, programming is one way to interact with computers. And yes, there's the view that there's like low code programming. So I don't have to know how to code. I still recommend it because from every new technology can be used for good, but it can also be used against you by an adversary. So an adversary can use low code to their advantage too, because you don't know coding, so you won't know if they modified it.
That's a great point, and I love that you mentioned low code, because just thinking about AI, right? It's already embedded in how students listening research, how they write, how they code, as you said, how they create. And I think one question that maybe isn't talked about enough is how do you know when the use is responsible versus when students are becoming dependent on it and don't know how to do it themselves, right?
Yes, yes. And so I think I was thinking about this um, when I was in high school. We had cash registers, and then we were modernizing to using computers to take our cash and give us receipts. And so what happens when that cash register, the new one, the computer one, went down? You had to have knowledge to be able to still take the cash and calculate with if you had a calculator or pen and paper, like if the lights went out, right? You're going to have to know how to still do it. And so there is a dependency on technology, and I would challenge you to still understand it, because things will fail. And they have to fail. Like, nothing's perfect. We don't build things to be perfect. And then also, that's a strategy for our adversary to cause things to fail. So if something fails, humans still need to know how to do the activity that the computers were doing, or the tech, or the AI, or the quantum was doing.
Oh, absolutely. Do you think this heavy AI use at a young age is strengthening or weakening, long-term problem-solving skills?
I think it can be either way, just on how you approach it. So I have a daughter, and she's turning 17. And sometimes she'll ask me questions, and I'm like, oh, put that in Chat GPT. That's a Chat GPT question. And then sometimes she'll ask me a question. I'm like, that's not a Chat GPT question. That's a Google. You should probably Google that one. And she understands that the answer might not be 100%. And I'll give you this example. She wanted to go to a concert to go see what Olivia Rodrigo, and she's like, okay, Chat GPT, I want to go see it. When is she going to be here? And it gave her the dates and when she wanted to, when the concert was. And when she went to go to Ticketmaster to go talk to her dad to be like, hey, can we buy these tickets? Ticketmaster didn't have it. ChatGPT gave her the wrong year. And so she's like, ChatGPT gave me this. And I was like, well, go back to ChatGPT and ask it, is it 2024 or 2025 dates? And then ChatGPT said, oops, my bad. And actually, it did say my bad. And it said, oh, my bad. I gave you the wrong year. So as long as you understand that, you know, that these technologies have strengths, but they have weaknesses, and to be able to challenge that and to verify as much as possible, I think that you're in a good position because it is very helpful in so many ways. Do I use AI in my daily life? Yes. Have I taught um, like the elderly how to use AI? Yes. Someone had a disagreement with someone at their church, and I was like, you know what? Put that whole thing in AI and ask AI how to respond to that lady. And, and of course they were scared, like, I don't know, I'm gonna take a nap before you show me how to use this AI thing. But it came out with great responses. And I was like, see, it's not scary. You just got to know its limitations and what to trust it with and what not to. So
Mm.
I think that it can be very valuable, but it's not for doing your homework because I already told you need to know how to do it for yourself. But can it check your homework? Yes.
That's a great answer. And, I think the reason why I'm asking is because I see it as, a professional in cyber. We have early professionals, recent graduates who are definitely pushed to use AI starting out
Yeah.
when, I didn't have that advantage when I started out in the workforce. So I think that we think a little bit differently. And
Hmm.
sometimes they're looking for those instant answers, instant fulfillment, instantly create something that they don't know how to build something. And that comes
Yeah.
from having to think for yourself versus relying on an AI tool. So I was just curious about your perspective, but that makes
Absolutely. Yeah. And the scary part is when you're using like AI for something you don't know anything about. Like you starting a career and you're using AI, you have no critical thinking skills to know if this is good or not. So that's where it gets a little tricky. Um, is that it could have gave you something that's good. It also might have gave you something that might get you fired, right? And you have no idea. So that's where if you had to start off using it, it's good to go back to the normal skills of like talking to a mentor or getting advice or counseling or things like that. Like, am I in the right direction? Because that knowledge can help grow you. So you want to use it in balance. Hmm.
absolutely. That's interesting. I think if I own this company, right, and I designed a
Yeah.
program for early professionals, I would probably ban AI for the first 2 years and no, but it's interesting because AI does make your job faster. And, unfortunately, there are less early professionals with jobs. I mean, we've seen the statistics of now, I think 10% less are hired every year after graduating. So the use of AI is almost required to get your work done fully. It's just a weird gap I think we're facing.
Yeah, and I'm going to believe that there's other countries that adopted AI before we did, and then they laid off workforce, and then they brought them back, right? And so part of that bringing back
Interesting.
is that just because you have AI and things are faster did not mean that it was better, right? And then, from my standpoint and the perspective is because you have AI out there, that's another attack vehicle. So I can use your stuff against you. And if I do, how you're going to know unless you have people. So while there might be fewer people now that might be hired, I'm hopeful in humanity to bring them back and that we strike this balance between human and computer interaction. And that, and that's another thing that I like to advocate for is that we never want to get to a world that computers are making decisions for humans. I think that's this very scary world to be in. And so as the viewers are watching this and as you're about to start your careers, I want you to keep ethics and responsibility in your brain because it's so important. And I'll give you an example, right? Or I'll give you two. Uh, from a national security perspective, right? You would not want a machine to make the decision whether to shoot a missile or not, right? There's a lot of things that goes into play when it comes to humans there. And so you really want a human in the loop to be able to make those decisions because computers go off of just data and they don't have that mindset for humanity. And the second, I'll use an example of a story that I heard from a friend. She had a car accident, and in the car, her seatbelt cut her severely, and that she was left very open. The data said she had less than a 20% chance to live. If AI made the decision, she would have died. But the surgeon was there. And when she looked up at the surgeon, she said, I don't want to die today. He said, I don't want you to either. And she's still alive today.
Mm.
So that is where, humans are very different from computers. And so keep that ethics and keep that responsibility and in your forefront, right? Because some people will care about cash and it's like, oh, I can make so much money, but there will come a cost to humans later. So I want you guys to be very responsible and ethical as you lead our new future.
From a cyber perspective, how do you think responsible innovation should come into play when adversaries aren't necessarily playing by the same rules?
Yes. So I think that there's a couple perspectives. If you can learn to have an adversarial mindset, and there's lots of things like ethical hacking and things like that to kind of give you that, or in playing or around with different tools while going through training. I think that helps you to think outside the box because that's what adversaries do. They're like, these are the rules. Let me go outside the box. I also believe that when you're defending, you can't just believe and trust just the rules, right? And so you have to have multiple layers to defend. So don't depend on one thing. So I'll give an example. Uh, when we started putting together the internet and connecting the computers, we wanted bad people to stay out. So we put in these things called gateways. And so that blocked bad traffic from coming in. Well, the adversaries learn how to get around that gateway. So if we depended only on gateways, it only stopped the adversaries for a little bit. So if we have the gateways and then we also put into place like things that check our identities. So if you get past the gateway, now we have something else to try to protect us. Well, now people are hacking and using AI to do identity. So what are the multiple layers of security that you can depend on? And don't depend on one, and don't always depend. And when you have multiple layers, don't always depend on the things um, that have got old because people have already figured out how to get around them. So always keep inventing at multiple ways to defend.
I like that point too, because you mentioned AI. We've talked about how it's been helpful and how it can accelerate the work that you do, but it's also a detriment for sure, depending on how it's used. So, what types of cyber threats have you seen become more sophisticated or even more prevalent because of AI?
Yeah, AI is pretty good. And so this is where I'm pretty glad that my daughter has me as a mom and she listens a little bit because she said, oh yeah, my friends listen to all these fake videos all the time. I'm like, yes, that's right. They're fake. And so she's like, oh, I have to go look at other sources to go find out, is this most probably fake or is this most probably real? And I think that's important for you guys is to, just because you see it now, it could be AI and AI is really, really good. And so how can you try to verify what you see before you formulate your opinion? So I think that's super important, and that's where AI has definitely shaped some things. But then there's other stuff that adversaries have done with AI. People look at AI as it is one box, and so I can just attack AI, and AI isn't. It's many different parts. And so there's a system called RAG, and then you have the LLMs that At least most people have heard about large language models, and then there's small language models out there, and then you have the data sources, and so there's many aspects to AI, and with all those different aspects, an adversary can attack any of those. And so that's where it gets very interesting, is if you're not protecting every element of that, your AI is weaker. And then the last part about AI that a lot of people don't realize is even if you made the most secure AI system, it will still drift away from how you created it. And so as it's used more and more and more, it will drift away from how you created it. And part of that is natural because you want it to be able to absorb new data and things like that. But that drifting also causes errors as well. And so there's AI is very interesting. It's a different way of looking. People call it, I think, adaptive software. I don't like the term software just because software, you program it, it always does these things, and AI does it, and it will never always do the same thing. And so it's very different, but it comes with a lot of benefits and opportunities.
Yeah, you mentioned that drift with the systems, which huge red flag. So, how do you
Yeah.
suggest for those listening building systems that can adapt as quickly as the threats targeting them? Is it by doing it by hand and not using AI?
Oh, this is where thought leadership comes in. We haven't figured it out, right? What is the right way? We
Mhm.
don't know. We built something that we're still testing out as we're using it, right? And so, what is the best practice? We don't have the best practice. We have a whole lot of ideas. And I went to school and I was working on my PhD before like ChatGPT like blew it all up, right? And in my paper, I had all of these things of when AI comes, then these are the steps that we want to use it responsibly and ethically, right? And so we want to be able to define it. We want to be able to test it. We also want a human to be, we wanted to have a position, an AI ethical officer, I think was the term that they were using at the time. And so that person would be responsible for like what is created and then how it operates. It's the wild, wild west out there. There's just so much AI on everything. And so, what are the best practices? We're figuring it out. But I do think, the steps that are being put in as we're figuring out, like the concept of guardrails is good. I think they're important. I don't think we should rely on them because I did meet a person last year who in their free time like to um, figure out how to get around guardrails or to beat the guardrails. So I was just like, oh my, and they were really sophisticated. And so, that kind of thing. And I was like, huh, I didn't know. So now I was way more scared and those kind of things. But I think guardrails are still super important. It should just not be your only um, I
Mhm.
think audits are going to be more important. So, we're going to need to know what we're going to audit, what we're going to check. And then if something goes wrong, how are we going to roll back to get to something that is safe? I think that is going to be very important. This is a Yolanda concept. And so am I seeing people doing the audits? No. But you know, will I see it? I think I'm having lots of conversations about it, and I think that we will see things like that coming up a lot more in the future. And there's a lot of other stuff, but we're developing best practices.
As we, continue to think about the future and, our listeners, while some of them are in high school, some of them are in college,
Hmm.
they're interns, they're early professionals. So what
Yes.
skills or mindsets do you think will matter most for the young people listening who want to help organizations stay ahead of adversaries? Thinking of AI.
Yeah, thinking of AI or quantum or what's next, right? Beyond quantum, because we have no clue what the future is going to be. And I can say the future changes very, very quickly. And so I would say to be very open-minded to new possibilities. I think there's a real danger in getting used to something. And so, for example, our cryptography, we've had that for like 30 years, little iterations along the way, but it's the same concept, the 30 years. That's going to be used against us with emerging tech. And so, being open to new possibilities and is going to be very important to be able to get in front of adversaries. Also, when you start thinking like an adversary, what do they gain, right? And so you think through that. Like there's things that they are going for. And so that tells us what is going to be most vulnerable, right? So let's look at banks. People love money. Banks will always be attacked. I mean, no matter what. And so in the future, that's going to happen. And so that is one motivation for adversaries. What are other motivations for them? And those are the things that you want to put some time into protecting those.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. Thank you. And I do have one official question for you, and then I do have a little bit of
Okay.
a fun one.
Okay.
Thinking about the people you work with, how your generation has handled technology, what would you want the next generation to do better than, today's leaders when it comes to using technology against adversaries?
I would want them to do what's ethical and responsible, right? And so as we are advancing, there's so many choices that we can make. And I want you to make really good choices that you will be proud of in the future for you, for your kids, and then your kids' kids. That's what I really want the next generation of people to really put focus on. We're going to have technology to help us make new technology, but that part is we want to do good. We want good technology out there. So we have the power and the brains and the talent to make the world safer and more equitable. And so use it for good.
Thank you. I feel inspired to go and do my job.
Do your job.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Reid, I do have a fun, just personality question for you.
Yes, yes.
Well, if you could invent a cyber role at your company, what role
Oh,
would that be?
oh my
Maybe it's
goodness.
something that you desperately need, or maybe you think it's something that could handle the emerging tech, or it could just be fun.
Oh my goodness. I, so I will create the auditing. I think that's very cyber auditing and for all emerging tech, building something that, how that can answer the question, can I trust this? Right. And then for fun, which is yeah, like nerdy fun, but man, this annoys me so much. Is like when I go on my phone and I go to a website and I don't want the cookies. And I'm like, my phone should know I don't want these cookies. And so I wouldn't, and sometimes I'm like, I should just sit down and code something that I can sell that always say no to all the cookies. And so I would totally do that. And if you have free time, please make that for me and I will help you market
It is
it.
annoying to say no every time.
Always no. I do not want to support marketing or I don't want you to be able to know my location. Always no. Always strictly whatever you is strictly necessary. That's all I want you to have. And I don't even want you to have that, to be
And a good
honest.
reminder for our listeners too to hit no.
Yeah. Always hit no. Do your updates on your phones because I mean the last iPhone updates when I heard what adversaries were doing, it was interesting. I was like, I need to go back and research that one. So, but yeah, if that would be my fun answer is every time I say no cookies, you should know this. I would totally make that.
Well, Dr. Reid, thank you so much for joining today. We appreciated your insights. You have a wealth of
Yes,
knowledge, and it was fun talking to you.
it
Hope
was
to have
so
you on
much
again
fun.
soon.
I'm so glad to have done this.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks for tuning in. We hope this conversation sparked your curiosity and got you excited about the world of cybersecurity. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with fellow cyber enthusiasts. Have a question or a topic you'd love us to explore? Connect with us on CyberChat's podcast page and join the conversation. Until next time, stay curious and keep the cyber chats going.